We all have a glorified idea of who Alex was.
Bring it on. Ah! Now I want it bad.
Never really had a need to go digging through all these memories until your kid comes along and decides to make a documentary about you.
Creating Torn took about 4 years or so. I would say probably close to 100 hours or so, maybe 150 hours of archival footage, and then several thousand slides were scanned. We had a DP and 2 camera ops plus sound and a gaffer and an AC. The first shoot in Tibet, me and my younger brother Sam shot that, and we shot that on A7s. For all the more intentional scenes, we ended up shooting on the Alexa Mini. I think our first cut probably came in around 2.5 hours, maybe a little shy of that.
I was 10 years old on October 5th, 1999.
We looked up and we saw that an avalanche had triggered. It should have been me. Survivor's guilt is a bear.
Avalanche high in the Himalayas, killing the best of our time, Alex Lowe.
Why were you compelled to tell the story of Alex?
I had thought about making a film about Alex just as a way to process personally, having more of a fleshed out idea of who he was as a man, digging into all this archive that exists, and just experiencing it for myself was kind of a draw, because up until when I started working on Torn, still hearing his voice and seeing motion video of him even 16 years after his death was still hard. And when his body was discovered in Tibet and we decided to make that trip, it was coming out of that experience that I really saw, the potency within a story about Alex would be really imbued in the story of our family and how each of us as individuals still interact with him, even 16 years after his death.
His body was never recovered. It's like an astronaut lost in space.
I think the footage from Tibet, the actual footage where the avalanche, we see the ramifications of the avalanche, is pretty devastating. What was it like going through that footage as an adult? And how did you decide what to keep and what to not put into the documentary?
There's the scene in the film where we had a camera crew there with us when I first got to see that footage in its raw format. And they made this little short film about the trip, which we watched when I was a small kid, but I was still kind of in the throes of dealing with the whole thing, and I didn't really remember it at all. And so seeing that footage at all, much less just the raw outtakes, these moments with Alex living out his life up into the last moments of it, was definitely intense. And I think you can see that in the scene with myself and Michael Brown, who is the filmmaker who shot all that stuff. I think that the point of that whole scene and playing it out as we did was to try and recreate that moment and allow the audience to feel how we as a family experienced Alex's death. You hear about these heroes who perish, and you hear about the sadness left in their wake and the wife and children, but this story is about how family moves through trauma. And I wanted to build out this true to life scene as I got to experience it for the first time, digging into that archive, how Conrad got to experience it, and then how my mom and my brothers all got to experience it as they remembered.
I had these 3 kids. Life was going really fast. I can remember Conrad arriving on my doorstep.
What could I do for Alex? What could I do to take care of all of you?
Why do you think Conrad's priorities changed? Because you do paint him a bit as the bachelor, the adventurer, the risk taker, where Alex is the father, the family man who's a risk taker. And then after the loss of Alex, Conrad steps up as the father figure of this family in a huge way, totally changing how the audience had perceived him before. Why do you think his priorities changed?
That was something that I think I was trying to explore for myself in the process of making this film. And In one of the final scenes, me and my mom are going through some of these old letters that Alex had written her and that Conrad had written her in the wake of Alex's death. And there's this one letter where he, it is just heart trodden and crushed, and he's thinking about us. He's finding solace in the loss of his friend and the breaking of his life as he knew it in sharing in our lives going forward. That trauma was unique to how we all moved forward together and why we did. I don't know if my mom and Conrad would have ended up together ever in another life if Alex hadn't have been that pivotal flashpoint, and his death in that way ended up bringing us all together.
This is about loss. This is about tragedy. This is about family and redefining family. But it is also a little bit about you accepting Conrad as your father. Did you know going into it that that was going to be something you tackled in this? Because it has quite an organic arc throughout the film.
One of the things that I saw coming out of Tibet when we embarked on this project was that Conrad was still struggling with this imposter syndrome and survivor's guilt, even all these years later. And I wanted to help him see that we valued him as a father. I started to realize more that I had lost this trust and love when Alex died. I always trusted that he would come back up into that point. And when you're a kid, you never consider the impossible that your parent is going to die. When you're 10 years old, that's just never something that you would ever imagine might happen. And when that happened, I think my trust in love and giving love as freely as I had up until that point was a little bit broken. And so the process of making this film for me personally was eye-opening in that sense, and in relation to my relationship with Conrad.
You were upset with me at first. You didn't take to Conrad like your brothers.
Conrad's the only dad I've ever known. Maybe less so for you, since you had 4 more years of knowing Alex.
You are my son. I have no other family. This is my family.
What's it been watching this, creating this, and how is everyone now? Do you feel like there has been healing because of the film that you made?
Yeah, I don't think that you can look back and be like, okay, I set out to do this one thing and I hoped that it would do this for each of the people that I was going to go through this with. And I've accomplished that. There's not like a finish line per se, but I think it has changed things around the conversation, at least for all of us. And that's mostly what I wanted to try and do with the film. I wasn't looking for an answer as much as an excuse to just talk about this more. That was really my biggest takeaway from Tibet, was realizing how little we had all talked about who Alex was to us as individuals. For me, a lot of the value in making this film and the final push over the edge to see the import in actually putting us through this as a family was the power in sharing it. The power when you are able to be vulnerable in this way and then share it with someone else, even if you don't know them at all, if it's a complete stranger. It breaks down barriers and opens up a door for people to experience things for themselves within their own life and experiences. Sharing that with my family this fall during the release of the film has been remarkably powerful.
I guess I'm curious as to why you want to make this film, considering it's something that we haven't explored with just ourselves. I feel like it's going to bring things out in the open, and then we'll just see if we can recover from that.